One of the greatest inventors of all time was Thomas Edison. He is the one who invented the light bulb. And one of his sayings was that, as he defined, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. I believe it was over 300 different elements that he tested before he found that tungsten was the material which would glow inside the light bulb without burning up. So genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. The topic for today is, how can you be busy and be profitable rather than being busy and being unprofitable? Today we're going to look at something that people often don't think about or talk about very much, but that is the importance of being consistent. And the proverb today is Proverbs 12:11. He who tills his land will have plenty of food, but he who follows vain pursuits will have poverty and plenty. Or, as it says here, he who pursues vain pursuits, empty pursuits, lacks sense. The Proverbs describes two energetic people. Neither of them are lazy. One endures the dull, monotonous, repetitive task that is boring, and the other is busy expending much energy pursuing all kinds of get-rich-quick schemes and ends up with nothing. Why do some stay on task while others get off the task quickly and end up as losers? That's what we're going to talk about today. Most people who have been successful in any discipline will attest to the fact that there is an incredible amount of boredom, repetition, tedious attention to details that defines a successful venture. And it's hard. And to be honest, it's hard to stay focused when we have a lot of distractions, especially nowadays, when it seems the internet gives us continuous distractions, and it's hard to mind our own business when we would rather look at other people's business and give them some of our ideas. But this particular financial gem says, he who tills his land will have plenty of food, but he who pursues worthless things, that is, chasing fantasies, pursuing daydreams, lacks sense. The point is that a lot of energy is expended, but it's going nowhere profitable. Why do people waste time? And I've done this too. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but it ends up going nowhere. Often I've been deceived. I haven't really thought through. I haven't investigated. I haven't had the discernment to spot a worthwhile pursuit from a useless pursuit. They're not thinking clearly. We don't want to be expending our energy without having clear, wise financial guidance, making sure that there is going to be some profit at the end. Now, it's very interesting that God has used the word tills his land. It's alternately translated as cultivates his land or works his land. It doesn't have to do with seeding the land or weeding the land or harvesting the land, but the apparent useless task of cultivating the land, working the land, preparing it for a future harvest. This takes an incredible amount of stamina and the ability to stay focused on something that seems useless. And that's exactly what the difference is between people who end up profitable and people who end up poor. Because the scripture says that he who pursues worthless things lacks sense. Obviously, they don't seem worthless, otherwise we wouldn't be pursuing them. But people who pursue worthless things don't have the sense or the heart or the discernment to see that that particular activity, even though it sucks up energy, is going to end up causing them poverty. So the question becomes, how can we stick to the boring tasks of gardening? And remember, the very first task that God gave our original parents was gardening. The oldest profession, just for the record, is gardening. Many years ago, I read a book about a 17th century monk called Brother Lawrence. And it was a collection of his letters called Conversations with God, or Practicing the Presence of God. And Brother Lawrence was a cook in a monastery, and we don't even know exactly where it was, but these letters remain because he noticed that the secret of sticking to a simple, tedious task is practicing the presence of God. So all the mundane jobs in a kitchen, whether cooking or cleaning, and often having grateful and appreciative consumers, he could do them well, and he could do them consistently with joy as he practiced the presence of God and recognizing that God's attention to detail is incredible. God has an incredible attention to detail, far, far, far beyond what we can imagine, and that he will give us the energy to do a simple, ordinary task with great joy and stamina, knowing that God will make it successful ultimately. Tedious tasks can be like torture, and frankly, all of us avoid tedious tasks. But unless we plow through, agricultural term, unless we plow through some of the boring aspects of a job, then we will never be profitable. We will never have a harvest. We have to plow through, because God says, he who tills his land will have plenty of bread, but he who pursues worthless things lacks sense. Again, the monastery is destroyed. The other people around Brother Lawrence are no longer known, but his practice of communicating prayerfully to God on a continuous basis and getting the energy and guidance to do simple little tasks kept him on task, kept him tilling his land, having plenty of bread. This is extremely important because there are a lot of sophisticated decoys that come at us and want to get us distracted from our core responsibilities, our core tasks. And lots of people are financially poor because they haven't learned the importance of stick-to-itiveness to do their existing job fully, especially in the period when it's tilling the land. It's not the excitement of an anticipated harvest when we're seeding, or an actual harvest when we're harvesting, or even pulling out weeds, but tilling the land when the weather is usually not very friendly. To increase our ability to stay with a task and to see it through to the end, and this is what I've done because I've had the same problem, I recommend that you go see this particular gentleman, Steady Eddie, and go to Wisdom with Wealth, click on that cartoon character, and you will have 9 specific proverbs that have to do with the importance of being a steady Eddie, kind of like the story of Aesop's fables, the tortoise and the hare. Now, obviously, the hare could greatly outrun the tortoise, but the hare had a problem with hubris, with pride, and being so full of itself that it decided not to just stick with the job. And of course, it's a fable, but the point is universal. And this proverb says, he who tills his land will have plenty of food, but he who pursues worthless things, chases fantasies, that person lacks sense. And when they lack sense, they end up impoverished. It's horrible. It's simply horrible to be busy expending energy and end up with nothing. What we need to do is we need to identify the land, that is to say, the resource that God has given us, and then use that resource on a consistent basis so we will have plenty of bread. Sadly, in our culture especially, the packaging of worthless things has become a fine art. And on the internet and with all the colors and visuals we have, people can do a magnificent job of deceiving us, making something appear worthful, when it is in fact worth less. So it is extremely important for us to have some discernment, sense, to evaluate an enterprise before we put our energy into it. Now, to be sure, not everyone has land. The proverb might suggest that perhaps we should try to have some kind of garden that we're managing for basic necessities. I think that's a great idea. But I believe that God has given everyone some area in which they can produce a regular, steady income. In some cases, it may be land and maybe a flock. It may be a classroom. It may be a position in an office. It may be some other asset which requires continuous attention. But there are some core activities that do produce profit. He who stays focused on work in their land will become profitable. It says will have plenty of bread. It doesn't say that they'll become super rich, but they'll have enough of the necessities. Sticking to those core profitable activities will ensure that we have enough food, that is, say, enough necessities. But he who pursues worthless things lacks sense. This is a universal classic. We need to rediscover it and apply it for our own financial health.